Hey, so bit of a disclaimer before you get into the video. I had played through the entirety of the game before noticing that my footage was full of like a horrendous amount of artifacting. So I apologize for that ahead of time. I feel like it's still a decent enough watch, but if that bugs you, I totally understand. So yeah, sorry about that. But I wasn't about to replay this fucking game just so that I could get better footage for it. I don't have the motivation for that. So enjoy Assassin's Creed. Wait. Hold on. God damn it. I know many people who hold this franchise with high regard, and just as many people who hate everything about it. It spawned an insane amount of sequels. So much so that the newer games are almost completely unrecognizable from the earlier ones in the series. But I had to say to myself, clearly Ubisoft did something right. Right? The first game is ultimately responsible for establishing the series, so it can't be all bad, can it?
Story.
You play as Altair. Altair? Alter? A hot-headed assassin who gets knocked back to the rank of novice for failing his mission and breaking the rules of the Creed. After getting a fellow assassin killed and another seriously injured, your master demotes you, or more accurately, stabs you in the chest. You wake up with the explanation that you saw what you wanted to see. Yep. Game doesn't even try to explain that one. Your master, Al-Molin, then instructs you to take the lives of 9 men, Templars to be precise. With each of them, you'll be restored a rank in the order and given new abilities or upgrades. So, like an unthinking puppet, you eagerly go and assassinate everyone on your hit list, one at a time. By the second target, you may even start questioning your motivations. You're sent to kill a doctor, who despite his cruel methods is ultimately trying to heal the sick and insane.
Heal the sick and insane. Heal the sick and insane.
This is where the game honestly started to surprise me. It's far from perfect storytelling, as we've already established. Many of the targets are just irredeemable pieces of shit, but each one of them has a distinct perspective to offer once you've killed them. Yeah, you heard me right. It quickly becomes apparent that things aren't as cut and dry as they seem. And as you work your way down that hit list, you learn more about what's really going on in the background. Speaking of the background, I didn't even mention the modern day plot. You play as Desmond, a descendant of Altair, who's been kidnapped by Abstergo, the Templars. It's also nearly 2012. You're being held so that they can find an object or a map that leads to these ancient vaults that were created by those that came before humans. In case you haven't guessed, I don't really care for the modern day side of the plot. I think the history light side of the games could stand on their own and still be just as passable. It seems Ubisoft had no idea how to tie this part of the game off themselves, considering how it ends.
Oh my god. It looks like... Is that blood? The hell were they keeping here before me? And what happened to him? What does it mean, I wonder?
That's where the game ends? Really? Oh my god. Overall, the story was interesting enough to hold my attention, which I honestly didn't expect. A lot of the performances do leave a lot to be desired, though. Altair himself is quite boring, but does have an arc and character development, so it's not all bad. His performance is just very muted and bland, in my opinion, and, that's a big deal when he's the character you're playing.
Gameplay.
Now here's a shocking one. Having not played an Assassin's Creed game since Black Flag, I remember the gameplay and parkour systems being incredibly shallow, boring, and most of all, easy. What if I told you the parkour in the first game is actually quite engaging? Hell, apparently the parkour throughout the entire franchise isn't as surface level as I remembered. At any point, you can animation cancel, meaning there are quicker and easier ways to get at the side of a building rather than scaling it head on. Now, what's even more surprising, in my opinion, is that this system is all about accurate inputs. Yeah, I know. When I first booted up the game and jumped in, it felt incredibly sluggish and generally unresponsive. And I immediately started to remember why I never completed the game so many years ago. But then, through a bit of Googling, I found out that I was the problem. You've essentially got three states, if you will. Low profile, which is walking, useful for blending in and not falling off ledges. High profile, a run that will let you hop off of objects and generally move around quicker. And finally, sprint or jump, which does exactly what you'd expect. If you hold down the sprint and jump button, you sprint. If you press it, you jump. With well-timed jumps, you can circumvent obstacles or cut the time it takes to scale a building in half. Later, once you unlock the ability to grab ledges, the climbing opens up even more. It's generally great. I had a ton of fun scaling buildings in freerunning, and I honestly expected it to be the worst part of the gameplay loop. The combat also isn't actually all that dull either. Throughout the course of the game, you unlock a decent array of combat abilities, so while it can still devolve into simply waiting, countering, and killing your opponents, you can also go on the offensive to score instant kills with well-timed consecutive attacks. Break the guard of an enemy, or grab them and throw them into a stall or off of a roof. It's still pretty shallow overall, but it had a lot more depth than I was expecting or remembered. Not only that, but I actually died, like, more than once? Challenge in an Assassin's Creed game? That just seems so alien compared to modern titles. Overall, while I initially found the game sluggish, I grew out of that opinion by continuing to play and learn about its mechanics. So, you might be saying, okay, so that's all well and good, Brett, but what do you actually do in this game? Well, as I mentioned before, it's a hit list. You travel to each major city in the game and kill targets. Before you can actually kill them, though, you have to obtain information about their whereabouts. So you're given rough directions about where to look in the city and have to complete a bunch of side missions. And here is perhaps the biggest criticism the game has: repetition. There are 4 types of side missions in the game, and they're all quite bland and very repetitive. You've got your trailing missions, pickpocketing missions where you hold B next to a guy to win, eavesdropping where you press Y while sitting on a bench to win, or you kill guards and collect flags for informer challenges. The director's cut version of the game, what I'm playing for this review, added 4 additional side missions to the game's pre-existing 4, so I didn't feel the repetition as much as I was expecting. But had these other missions been absent, I certainly would have. Once you've completed enough side missions in the city, you'll head back to the Assassin Bureau, where you'll then be tasked with actually killing your target. The assassinations themselves are actually kind of open-ended. The areas your targets are in are quite small for the most part, but how and where you assassinate them is up to you. Sometimes they do something unexpected, like try and run away through the city streets or start kicking your ass despite being an 80-year-old man. Or in the case of your final target, they put a skilled swordswoman in place, which, once I defeated her, I was left completely baffled by the game's logic.
You are not my target. I will not take your life. You're free to go.
Hold on. So, I'll spare her, but I won't spare the poor bastards on the street who are just doing their jobs? This whole game I've been thoughtlessly murdering countless people who aren't considered innocent, but no, I won't kill the person who literally tried to take my life and is working directly for my target. Perhaps one of the biggest flaws with the gameplay is the AI's detection system. It's just broken. Oftentimes they know where you are without even looking at you, and will start to detect you regardless of whether they have line of sight or not. This can get pretty irritating later in the game when you have to remain undetected for certain side missions, but have your cover blown almost immediately by a dude who arguably shouldn't even know you're there. For a game with such simple AI, it's pretty aggravating when they become clairvoyant and know exactly where you are, but hey. There is also just a general sense of jank to the game that never really went away for me, particularly when you enter the open countryside between cities. It seems like the game just starts to break down out there. I also encountered a ton of micro stutter that I was never really fully able to resolve out in the wilderness. So after riding to each city, I never went out there again, except for story purposes. Not that there's much to do out there anyway, but still it's worth mentioning.
Sound.
It's an old game. I'm not sure what you were expecting. Some of the sound effects are still very crisp and meaty, while others are highly compressed. The most annoying of these are the random conversations or dialogue that the people of the streets have to say. They all repeat the same lines over and over and over, especially the citizens who are being shaken down by the guards. I swear, I heard the same at least 400 times throughout my 10-hour playthrough. Combat sound effects, on the other hand, are great and make the experience of massacring hundreds of guards far more satisfying than it otherwise would be. Voice acting, as I alluded to earlier, does leave something to be desired for a lot of characters in the game.
What are you doing?
But the quality is alright, so that's something at least. Music is quite generic overall, and it's a damn shame Ubisoft didn't go for a full Middle Eastern soundtrack. Imagine if this game had something akin to Stronghold Crusader. That would seriously elevate the experience, but as it is, it's forgettable.
Conclusion.
I'm still not entirely sure what to think of Assassin's Creed. I was so ready to tear into this thing, but I ultimately ended up being glad I revisited it. Part of me wishes that instead of the open world route the series took, that Ubisoft focused on the assassinations themselves. Maybe even took more inspiration from Hitman or something along those lines. Is Assassin's Creed worth revisiting? I'd say yes, provided you can get a copy for cheap and are willing to learn the quote-unquote deeper parts of its gameplay. I got mine on GOG for $7 Canadian, so I can hardly complain at that price. But I don't think I could recommend it for 20. I genuinely had fun, and I wasn't really expecting to, just given my taste in games these days. So maybe you'll pull some enjoyment from it as well. And with that, you've made it to the end of the video. Yeah, thanks so much for watching. Assassin's Creed's not a franchise I typically like to associate myself with. So, yeah, no, I was actually really surprised that I didn't absolutely hate this game. I don't know that I would continue to play the series or franchise. Just, you know, I hate Ubisoft, if I'm honest. They're up there for me, in terms of, you know, companies I just will not support anymore. And, yeah, no, I was shocked. I mean, apparently they were at one point capable of making good video games. Who'da thought? Well, passable. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, as always. If you made it to the end, I really appreciate it, and do take care.